All right, I'm here at AWS reInvent and it's day 3. Look who I have with me, Chad Sanderson and Apoorva. Chad Sanderson, CEO and co-founder of Gable. Apoorva, managing director at Zetta. Such a pleasure to have you here and welcome to the Ravit Show.
Yeah, great being here.
Awesome. So I'm gonna ask you some difficult questions. Okay, just kidding. I'm gonna learn more about what you all are doing in how's Gable doing. You recently announced about the company. Not so recent, but yeah. Love your work. And Apurva, I'm gonna ask you on the investor perspective a few questions. But just for our audience, I'm pretty sure they know you all. But do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Chad Sanderson, like
Yeah.
you said. I am the CEO and co-founder of Gable. I've been in the data industry a pretty long time. I used to run the data platform team at a company called Convoy. Prior to that, I was a tech lead on the artificial intelligence platform team at Microsoft. And then I've run data or data infrastructure at some big companies out there, Subway, Sephora.
Yep.
I've worked at Oracle as a data consultant and many other places.
That's awesome.
And I'm a partner at Zetta Ventures, and Zetta Ventures has been around as a AI native venture fund for almost a decade. So
Yeah.
we don't just invest in the entire stack of AI ML, we also invest in data infrastructure
Yeah.
and developer tools. And I've been in venture for close to a decade. I'm an engineer by training, but I've been an operator for a while where I mostly led go-to-market roles. But really enjoy investing at the inception stage. And Zeta is known for backing, being the first institutional backer
Yeah.
of companies in all the domains that I've just described.
This is awesome, and I've obviously seen your journey as well, Apurva, and I love it how you've gone out there and help companies to get from point A to point B, and you do continuing to do that, right? So thank you very much. Quick question for you, Chad, in terms of Gable. Can you tell us a little more about it? What's the idea behind it, and why data quality?
Yeah, well, the problem I noticed in my previous career as an IC at Convoy and also Microsoft was that there seemed to be a big disconnect between the data producers that were generating data. So these could be software engineers, it could be salespeople doing data entry, it could be financial analysts inputting data into an Excel dashboard,
Yeah.
and the data consumers that ended up using that data. So your
True.
data engineers, your data scientists, your data analysts, your ML engineers, these people were not talking to each other, and in many cases, the producers had no idea that the consumers, number one, even existed, and
Yeah.
number two, how they were using the data. And so what this meant was that all of these really great best practices for data management, like data quality and data governance and
Yeah.
compliance and security, was only being applied on the data layer and the metadata layer.
Yeah.
And they weren't being applied at all to the code layer that was generating that data in the first place. And this is a huge problem
Yeah.
because any change that happens to that code that affects the data essentially is going into a black box for that software engineer.
Exactly.
And in my opinion, this is the root cause of most data quality issues.
Yeah.
Is data producers not understanding what they're going to be impacting when they make changes, and when those changes
True.
happen, it violates the expectations of the consumers, and that's what we are building our product to solve.
I love it, and just even before Gable, I've been following you, and you have that voice in the space where you've had so many community members come and talk, and you've actually, to be honest, I've heard that you've actually made a lot of community members excited about data contracts and the producers side. So I think definitely looking forward to learning more about Gable in the coming months, and love your work. So Apurva, quick question for you. As an investor, I'm pretty sure you might be getting questions around data, AI. There might be so many companies that you might be just auditing through and learning more about. What are you most excited about in this space currently, and do you have anything that you would like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I guess the data space is constantly evolving. There are, and Chad and I were discussing, there are like these two broad market forces that
Yeah.
are playing in the market. Like one is around the cost and complexity of the stack itself.
Right.
Because everyone is kind of centralizing the data in the warehouse.
Yeah.
And then thinking of data quality as an afterthought. So that's why there are these like layers of transformation, quality, lineage, so many layers that are being built downstream of the warehouse, um, and that adds to cost and complexity, and
Yeah.
everyone is struggling with that. The other is this market force, which is a tailwind around ML,
Yeah.
because which involves all stakeholders in the company, in the enterprise, and everyone wants access to data, but also everyone cares about data governance as well. So all those things lead to kind of completely rethinking and reshaping the stack.
Yeah.
And when you rethink and reshape the stack, it takes you back to fundamentals. And when
True.
it takes you back to fundamentals, you think about like what did companies like Snowflake and Databricks do differently?
Yeah.
How did they create like data primitives in a different way that led to massive value for the customers and for the investors? And that's why I'm excited about the idea of investing behind the data primitives for the next generation.
Wow.
Where data contracts is the starting point for a next data primitive,
Right.
and it could build into something even bigger than that.
Agreed. In terms of your portfolio, do you want to share a little about your current portfolio? How does it look like?
Yeah, so since I invest across AI, ML, data, and developer tools, we obviously have a portfolio in AI, ML, and AI,
Yeah.
ML or BI ends up being the downstream use cases of data. But
Yeah.
if I just focus on the kind of data companies that we've invested in, they range from like database companies like, for example, VV8, which is building the next gen vector database. We were the
Yeah.
pre-seed investors in VV8,
Right.
and it's become a fundamental building block of the LLM tool chain.
Right.
As developers are kind of deploying LLMs and building LLMs
Yeah.
in their workflows. Outside of that, I was an early investor in MotherDuck, which is commercializing DuckDB.
We
in the
all know
market,
about it. Yes.
which is another primitive that is helping you rethink that whether you need to like centralize all kinds of data.
Yeah.
Because according to Jordan, which I completely agree, most data needs are not big data needs.
Yeah.
And if you could like use the data that you need, where you need it,
Yeah.
and when you need it, that's what DuckDB enables you to do.
Yeah.
And then companies like Tabular, for example, which are commercializing Apache Iceberg. Apache
Yes.
Iceberg is the go-to transactional data format,
Yeah.
which kind of again rethinks the stack, because it helps you think about like, because as people realize not to centralize all the data in the warehouse, they've started to like put the data or store the data in S3 or R2.
Yeah.
And when the data lies there, then you want that data to be in the right format, to be used by all kinds of compute engines.
Yes.
And so Tabular is building the neutral storage
Yeah.
on top of that, which is like an inbuilt meta store
Yeah.
that enable and that interplays with all compute engines like Athena, BigQuery, even Snowflake and Spark.
Right.
It gives enough flexibility. So it kind of, to a certain extent, unbundles the data stack.
Yeah.
But it also gives you enough flexibility and visibility
Yeah.
into how to use that data. So those are the new data primitives that I'm excited about, and Chad's company fits in that thesis.
Yeah, no, I love it. And talking about VV8, I met the team at AWS reInvent. Sebastian came up with a course as well with Andrew Engi, and
Yep.
it's amazing, right? With educating the community, if you can build something, that's the best thing I feel.
Yep.
And even Mother Duck, Jordan, Ryan, also talking about Tabular. I think these are amazing
We
companies.
also have many more like data-focused companies. I haven't mentioned all of them.
Yeah.
Telma is another one, which
Oh,
is
wow.
focused on data quality as well.
Yeah.
But that's downstream of the warehouse.
Yeah.
But again, every one of them is solving a critical problem
Right.
for the stack, and excited about all of them.
Okay, this is fantastic. Thanks, Apoorva, for sharing that. Quick question for you, Chad. I know when you might have started Gable, there might be so many challenges that the customers, the prospects, even the community members might have come across in, asked you about that. Okay, what all can be solved by Gable? Do you want to share any of those challenges that Gable is currently, focused on, and how can we look at Gable in the future as well?
Yeah, so really what we are trying to build at Gable, to be succinct about it, is software engineering best practices
Right.
that have been applied for the data domain.
Yeah.
So unit testing, integration testing, static code analysis, CI/CD,
Right.
everything that software engineers have, I wouldn't say taken for granted, but they've gotten the benefit of for the last 30 years, there are really great practices around change management for code that don't exist for data. And so it makes sense why when code is changing upstream that impacts data, it causes data quality issues, it causes data governance and compliance issues.
Right.
And some of the challenges in building out a system like that is, well, I mean, number one, all of the existing tooling that exists for software engineering doesn't work for data, right? So you might have a pull request, and software engineers might say, hey, I've made some change to a code base, I want another engineer on my team to review it, and that makes a lot of sense when you're in more of a product-oriented, microservice-oriented environment.
Yes.
But in data, what you really care about is not getting the review by the person on your team, but by someone on another team that might be using that data for a completely different reason.
100%.
So how do you notify someone on a different team that a code change is going to be impacting the data at the point in time where they have the ability to review it, right?
Interesting, yes.
And create that feedback loop. So there's a lot of interesting timing issues. We need to have the ability to translate code changes into data changes, and there's some really cool technology that we're using to do that. And then there's also an incentive problem, right? Because today, a lot of software engineers don't have to think about the data because it's a completely separate and distinct problem for them in their daily life, right?
True.
Their job is to build their product and work on their microservice and whatever it might be, and hey, if I make a change that ends up breaking a machine learning model downstream, that's not really my problem. How could I possibly know about it?
Exactly,
So our product has to be able to create good incentives by driving accountability. And one of the ways that we do that is by letting software engineers know when they're making changes, what they are going to be impacting, what outages they're going to cause, and what are the data products downstream that will be impacted by those changes. So we're not just shipping random code, we're going to be breaking a pricing model that makes us $100 million a year. Or we're going to be breaking a dashboard that the CFO uses to report out all their sales metrics on a weekly basis. So once you have visibility and awareness, you also have accountability too.
I love it, and that has been your passion since so many years. We've been seeing not only just that, like even before Gable or when you were at Convoy, you used to share so much about it, and you are actually solving those problems, which is pretty good. And quickly, in terms of, I can't obviously, as we conclude our chat, I can't leave you two without talking about GenAI. So, what are your thoughts about GenAI, and how do you see it in 2024?
I'll give my thoughts and I'll turn it over to Apoorva, who has probably a much more holistic view of GenAI than I do, because I'm only focused on the data side of it. One of the things that we're hearing, and it's becoming much more common talking to data scientists and GenAI engineers, is that the type of model that you are using to train doesn't really matter so much when you're working with large data sets and you're trying to hyper-optimize. So your hyperparameters, the way that you tune those, the optimizations that you add into your model, it ultimately all takes you to the same place, which is becoming a reflection of the data set that you train the model on in the first place. And this has really huge implications for GenAI, because what it means is that it doesn't really matter. The primary thing that matters is your data, its quality, the volume, how well you semantically understand what that data means. And today, most companies that are trying to train GenAI models on their own internal data still have a lot of work to do when it comes to quality and governance.
I agree, 100%. What do you think, Apoorva?
It's a very broad question, so I'll try and break it down. So, GenAI has kind of brought to the market pre-trained models. Like in the past, like for a new company to be able to adopt ML, it used to take a long time because you had to train the data, you had to clean the data, train the model, build the model, deploy the model. It was a long process. And it used to take a long time, and you needed like specialists. You needed MLOps. You needed data scientists as a part of your team. Now, LLMs have simplified that because now these are REST APIs being provided by OpenAI or Anthropics of the world. And again, those are like managed models, but there are also open source models like Llama 2 and others that have come out in the market, which has given capabilities to a new set of audience over here. Like earlier ML was only a data science focused problem.
Yeah.
Now it's a problem that is focused on the entire company itself. Like
Exactly.
there's
I
a
agree.
top-down strategy in every company where the CEO is asking every BU or every business unit to figure out their AI ML strategy. Now the
Okay.
people who are like building these models and deploying these models have also changed. So it's developers now
Yeah.
who are tasked with like building these models and deploying these models, who historically haven't worked with data workflows, who
Yeah.
historically haven't trained models before.
Yeah.
And many use cases you don't need to train models,
Yeah.
and you don't need to think about data workflows. In many use cases you do have to think about all of those things.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that has led to like a net new set of tools or infrastructure needs
Right.
for developers,
Right.
which is more ML focused. So one of the areas that we're excited about is what is the net new AI infrastructure or tools
Yeah.
that are needed for figuring out what model to use, figuring out like what data to use, how to store that data, which we spoke about VV8,
Yeah.
how to build those models, how to deploy those models
Yeah.
in production, with assurance in place that they
Yeah.
don't hallucinate. So that entire thing requires a tool chain.
Yeah.
So one is that area which will be the next area of innovation.
Yeah.
Where a lot of companies are coming up and there'll be winners in each of those categories. They're creating new subcategories within that tool chain itself. The other is on the application side. I think till now we've mostly seen wrappers being built around APIs.
Yeah.
But just like cloud native SaaS companies came up and cloud native mobile apps came in.
Yeah.
Similarly, over here, there's a new generation of AI native applications that are coming up.
Yeah.
Some of those AI native applications will be very domain specific. So for example, like we are very excited about the intersection of AI with domains like bio, where you can like disrupt drug development as and target selection as a pain point.
Yeah.
Because that was a very manual and brute force approach. But it requires bilingual teams. It requires teams who understand bio. It requires teams who understand AI ML.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's one area. The other is the broad theme is how do you think about disrupting services today, specialized services today, and we've started seeing that to a certain extent with legal services and others.
True.
But the services being involved, specialized services involved in every part of the enterprise. For example, IT services. For example, DevOps. Where you need like SREs to be able to troubleshoot and get to the pain point as quickly as possible. So we feel like the next generation of AI native applications will disrupt services.
Yeah, exactly.
And might not go after software initially.
Yeah.
But software is a part of that workflow. So once you start disrupting services, you will and might disrupt software in the future. But there's a big opportunity to disrupt services in the short term. But I think the last piece, before I take too much time, is disrupting the data stack itself, where I think, from Chad's point of view, a lot of data is now being collected through applications.
Yeah.
Now, historically, a lot of that data was processed or analyzed ad hoc later on by data teams. But with LLMs in the mix, you want the data to be analyzed and you need to know whether the data is authentic, high quality, right schema within the application itself.
Yeah.
That changes the paradigm of the data stack.
Okay.
And that's why things like data contracts and Gable comes in again, because now the nature of the developer teams or the engineering teams changes. They become like product leaders.
True.
And they need to know like what kind of data they're collecting.
Yeah.
Historically, they were not burdened by that. They were just taking the data, throwing it into the warehouse.
True.
And then that issue was the data team's issue.
Yeah.
But now it's become the engineering team's issue as well.
Okay.
So that will rethink the data stack going forward in many ways.
Wow, I love these insights. Thanks, Apoorva, for sharing those. I'm pretty sure this conversation can go longer, but and we'll do a full-fledged session as well for our audience where we can talk more in detail and show and tell them more things. But if folks want to reach out to you, what's the best place, Apoorva? Where can they reach out to you?
Either LinkedIn or email.
Okay.
My email is apoorva@zettavp.com.
Okay, awesome. Chad?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me. Just Chad Sanderson on LinkedIn,
Okay.
or also email chad@gable.ai.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. And thanks for doing this, Chad and Apoorva. It's such a pleasure to host you both on the Rabbit Show. I'll see you very soon.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome.